In the year 2450, humanity had long since spread across the stars, carving out an empire among the countless civilizations that populated the galaxy. But as Earth's influence grew, so did the enemies who sought to extinguish the human light. No one expected that humans, a species once on the brink of extinction, would rise to dominate the galactic stage. Yet, in the cold silence of space, that very same species found itself in the fight of its life. It all began when the Galactic Council, a vast alliance of alien races who govern the known universe, declared humanity's expansion a threat. The Council had been in power for millennia, and they were loath to accept a race that had so quickly risen to prominence. Despite humanity's peaceful intentions, the Council saw them as a dangerous anomaly, an unpredictable species that defied all expectations. And so, they united their forces, determined to crush this upstart species before it became a serious threat. Humanity, however, would not be cowed. When the Galactic Armada arrived at the Sol system, humanity's homeworld, it was an overwhelming force. The Council's fleet was vast and advanced, with ships that dwarfed anything humanity had ever seen. There were millions of ships, each brimming with powerful weapons and alien technology, capable of annihilating entire planets. The humans, in contrast, had only a fraction of that number, with their technology still largely reliant on older designs, patched together with limited resources. It seemed a foregone conclusion. Earth would fall, and humanity's existence would be erased from the galactic records. But the human spirit was not one to surrender easily. They had survived worse than anyone could imagine, and they were not about to let some distant alien alliance wipe them out without a fight. At the heart of the conflict was Admiral Sarah Kensington, a decorated war hero with a reputation for defying the odds. She was in command of the human fleet, a ragtag collection of ships that ranged from old warships to newly crafted vessels, none of which came close to matching the might of the Galactic Armada. Yet Sarah had a secret weapon, something that the Council had underestimated: the unyielding will of her people. "Admiral, the enemy fleet is moving into position," came the voice of Lieutenant Marcus Hayes, her second-in-command. He stared at the holoscreen displaying the vastness of the approaching enemy fleet. Hundreds of thousands of ships, all circling like vultures, ready to strike. Sarah looked at the map of the galaxy, then out the window at the stars that dotted the endless black. "We won't give up," she said quietly, almost to herself. "We'll find a way to turn the tide." Her crew had always trusted her. They'd seen her pull victory from the jaws of defeat more times than they could count. But even Sarah felt the weight of the situation. The enemy fleet was too large. They were outnumbered by millions. Any battle would be a suicide mission, but there was no choice. They had no place to retreat to, no allies who could help in time. In the Council's eyes, humans were nothing more than a passing curiosity. But that was their mistake. What they failed to account for was humanity's refusal to give up. When everything seemed impossible, humans found a way to keep fighting and to find success in the most unlikely places. The first battle began in the asteroid belt. The humans had little time to prepare, but they made the most of what they had. Instead of engaging the enemy head-on, Admiral Kensington ordered her fleet to scatter into the asteroid field. The human ships, small and nimble compared to the massive Council vessels, used the dense field of rocks and debris to their advantage, hiding in plain sight. The enemy, overconfident and complacent, had expected a swift victory. They underestimated the cunning of the human fleet. As the Galactic Armada moved into the belt, the humans struck. With their advanced targeting systems and superior maneuverability, they delivered pinpoint strikes on the enemy's vital systems. The chaos that followed was staggering. Dozens of enemy ships were crippled before they even had a chance to respond. The human ships darted in and out of the asteroid field, almost ghost-like in their speed and precision. The aliens' larger ships, while powerful, lacked the agility to fight in such an environment. They were forced to slow down, trying to adapt to a new style of warfare they had never experienced. This was humanity's first victory, a small one, but it was enough to prove to the Galactic Council that they were not to be taken lightly. Humans might have been outnumbered, but they were far from outmatched. Admiral Kensington's voice rang out over the comms, her words echoing through the human fleet. This is just the beginning. We've taken the first step. Now we show them what humanity can do. And so, the stage was set for a war that would see the galaxy change forever. The humans may have been outnumbered, but they had one thing the Council could never understand: an unyielding will to survive. They would prove it with every battle, every sacrifice, and every victory they earned against impossible odds. The fight was just beginning, and humanity's greatest weapon was about to be revealed. The small victory at the asteroid belt sent ripples throughout the galaxy, but the war was far from won. The Galactic Armada, stunned by the sudden and unanticipated losses, quickly regrouped. They had the numbers, the technology, and the resources to crush humanity, but something in the way they fought had shifted. For the first time in millennia, the once unified Council began to question the inevitability of their victory. Admiral Kensington's tactics, though unconventional, were paying off. She had taken the fight to them in a way the Council had never imagined. But despite the successes, the human fleet was still grossly outmatched. Their ships were smaller, less advanced, and often outgunned. They had no choice but to keep up their guerrilla-style warfare, relying on their superior agility, cunning, and, most importantly, the sheer determination that had come to define humanity. Back on Earth, President Eleanor Clark faced mounting pressure to end the war. The cost in lives and resources was staggering, and the Council's fleets were closing in on the outer colonies. Yet, despite the dire reports, the President's resolve never wavered. "We didn't survive the collapse of our own world only to fall to alien invaders now," she said in a speech to the United Nations Council. Her words resonated deeply with the human spirit, reminding everyone that they were more than a series of territories and colonies. Humanity was a living, breathing force, a force that would not bend or break under pressure. On the front lines, the fleet had its own set of problems. The human warships, though fast, were beginning to show signs of wear. Supplies were running low, and the relentless pursuit of the enemy was taking its toll. Despite the odds, Sarah's resolve was clear. They would not stop fighting. "Admiral, we've got reports of another Council fleet advancing from the Xiphos system," Lieutenant Hayes reported grimly, his brow furrowed with concern. "It's a full-scale invasion force, more than double what we've already faced." Sarah clenched her fist. She had expected this, but it didn't make it any easier to bear. "Get me a strategy that will force them to bleed," she replied. "This won't be the end of us. Not yet." Despite the overwhelming numbers, Sarah's mind worked quickly. She ordered the fleet to scatter once again, but this time they would have a different weapon in play: human ingenuity. "Get every ship to work on repairing their stealth systems," Sarah instructed. "We're going to play their game. Let's give them a taste of their own medicine." The Council had relied heavily on their advanced tracking and scanning systems, believing they had the upper hand. But what they didn't anticipate was that humans were far more resourceful than they'd ever imagined. In the chaos of their guerrilla tactics, humans had been secretly upgrading their fleet's stealth capabilities, using old Earth tech that was far less sophisticated but, in the right hands, far more unpredictable. The next battle took place near the remote gas giant of Vark 7. The Council's forces, confident in their numerical superiority, moved into the sector with all the arrogance they had shown before. They had learned little from their previous defeat. They didn't know that the human fleet was already hiding in the sector's nebula cloud, using its dense gas to conceal their ships. They had also reinforced their ships with powerful jammers that would obscure their presence from the enemy's sensors. The battle began without warning. The Council's ships were caught off guard as the human fleet surged from the nebula, attacking in perfect coordination. The enemy was unprepared for the brutality of the attack. The humans struck swiftly, disabling key communications and targeting weak points in the massive Council ships. They didn't waste time on anything that wouldn't give them a quick advantage. For hours, the battle raged on, with the humans forcing the Council's forces into a desperate retreat. The larger ships were now vulnerable, their size and lack of maneuverability proving a liability. The humans, small but quick, exploited every opening, pushing their ships to the limit. They knew that this was their moment, their chance to break the back of the invaders. In the middle of the chaos, Admiral Kensington stood tall, watching the battle unfold on her command deck. She knew that they had to keep the momentum going, keep hitting hard. She could see the cracks beginning to form in the Council's resolve, a hint of fear beginning to creep into their ranks. "Tell the fleet to keep the pressure on," Sarah ordered, her voice calm but firm. "They may have the numbers, but we have the heart. They're not prepared for what we can do." And then, something unexpected happened. The Council's massive flagship, a behemoth known as the Exarch, began to retreat. It was a humiliating defeat for the Council, their finest ship and the symbol of their dominance retreating before the might of humanity. Back on Earth, the news of the victory was met with overwhelming pride and joy. For the first time, humanity saw hope where there had been none. The tide had begun to turn. The Council's overconfidence had led to their first major defeat at the hands of a species they had once considered inferior. Admiral Kensington's words echoed across the human fleet once more. "This is only the beginning. We've shown them our strength, but the war is far from over. Now we make them understand. No one, no matter how many they are, can ever outmatch humanity." And as the fleet regrouped for the battles to come, they all knew one thing. They were no longer fighting just for survival. They were fighting for something greater, the freedom to thrive and prove that humanity could stand tall against the greatest odds. In the aftermath of the human victory near Vark 7, the Galactic Council was shaken. They had underestimated the resourcefulness and tenacity of humanity, a species they had once dismissed as insignificant. But the Council was not an organization that bowed easily. Their failure at Vark 7 had only served to ignite a fire of rage in their ranks. They rallied their forces, determined to crush humanity once and for all. The newly formed task force, called the Obsidian Strike, was the largest fleet ever assembled in the history of the galaxy. It consisted of thousands of ships, each outfitted with the most advanced weapons and technology the Council had at its disposal. The humans were outmatched in every sense, and the odds of survival were rapidly shrinking. Admiral Kensington knew what was coming. She had seen the calculations and understood the gravity of the situation. Humanity's fleet, though growing in strength and numbers, was still a mere fraction of the enemy's size. Yet, for all the power the Council could bring to bear, they could never replicate what made humans so formidable, their unbreakable will to survive, to fight, and to win. In the days leading up to the next battle, Sarah gathered her senior officers to discuss their strategy. The room was filled with the hum of quiet conversations as the weight of their predicament sank in. Lieutenant Hayes, her ever-loyal second-in-command, stood by her side, his face etched with determination. But even he couldn't mask the concern in his eyes. "We're fighting a losing battle, Admiral," Hayes said bluntly, his voice low. "We've got nowhere near the resources or the firepower to match their fleet. Every time we win a small victory, they only come back stronger. How long can we keep this up?" Sarah looked at him, her expression hardening. "We'll keep going as long as we need to. I didn't sign up for this war because I thought we'd win easily, Marcus. I did it because I believe in what humanity stands for. They might have the firepower, but we have something they'll never understand: our will to survive. That's our advantage. And it's the one thing they can never take from us." The strategy they devised was simple: hit them where it hurt most. The humans wouldn't stand a chance in a direct confrontation. Instead, they would strike at the heart of the Council's supply lines, targeting critical systems and infrastructure. The hope was that, by cutting off the Council's resources and logistics, they would force them into a prolonged war of attrition, one the humans were better suited to win. The first phase of the operation began in the Zeta Cluster, a strategic crossroads that connected several key systems vital to the Council's war effort. It was a highly defended region, protected by a massive network of orbital defense stations. But humans weren't afraid of overwhelming odds. They thrived in them. The human fleet moved quickly and stealthily, using their updated stealth technology to slip past the Council's defenses. It wasn't an easy feat. The Council had anticipated human tactics and had laid down a sophisticated web of sensors and traps. But the humans had one advantage the Council had failed to account for: their ability to adapt in real time. As the human ships entered the heart of the Zeta cluster, they were immediately spotted. But instead of retreating, they fought with a ferocity that surprised even their most seasoned commanders. Admiral Kensington's fleet wasn't there to win the battle. They were there to send a message. In the midst of the chaos, the humans made a bold move. They targeted the Council's supply depot on the fourth moon of the gas giant Zervith. The depot housed the materials needed to sustain the Obsidian Strike fleet, and its destruction would severely cripple the enemy's ability to continue the war. It was a suicide mission, but one that had to be done. The human ships fought their way through swarms of enemy fighters and massive dreadnoughts. Every ship that fell was replaced by another, the fleet's resolve hardening with each passing minute. The Council's fleet responded with overwhelming force, but the humans' relentless attacks kept them off balance. The target was in sight. As the human assault force neared the depot, the Council fleet unleashed a barrage of devastating firepower. The human ships, though battered and damaged, pressed on. They had no choice. Now or never, Sarah muttered under her breath, watching the progress on the main screen. The final charge was nothing short of heroic. The humans launched their final assault, using every last ounce of their remaining firepower to breach the depot's defenses. As the depot exploded in a massive fireball, the shockwave reverberated through the entire region. It was a devastating blow to the Council, one that would take months, if not years, to recover from. But it wasn't just the depot's destruction that caught the Council off guard. It was the sheer willpower of the humans who carried out the mission. These were not soldiers who fought because they had to. They fought because they believed in something greater than themselves. They fought for their families, for their people, and for the future of their species. As the surviving ships limped back to their home fleet, the human commanders took a moment to catch their breath. They had paid a heavy price. The loss of several ships had been devastating, but the mission had been a success. The Council had lost one of its most crucial resources, and they were beginning to realize that, no matter how many ships they threw at humanity, they could not break their spirit. Admiral Kensington stood on the bridge of her flagship, gazing out at the stars. The battle had been costly, but it was a victory for the human spirit. In that moment, she knew one thing for certain. The Council had underestimated humanity, and that was a mistake they would soon come to regret. "Keep fighting," she whispered. "We've only just begun." The war was far from over, but humanity had shown its true strength. The Council now knew they were dealing with a species that could never be broken. The war had raged on for months, and with each passing battle, humanity's resolve grew stronger. The Council's forces were vast, but the humans had learned how to strike where it hurt the most. The destruction of the Zervith depot had sent shockwaves through the Galactic Council, but it was only the beginning. The humans were no longer fighting for survival alone. They were fighting for something far greater. They were fighting for their future and for the freedom to exist among the stars. After the successful strike on Zervith, Admiral Kensington knew that humanity could not win by fighting battles of attrition alone. They had proven they could survive, but now they had to do more. They had to bring the fight to the Council in a way that would force them to rethink their strategy entirely. And so, she began to plan her most audacious mission yet, a direct assault on one of the Council's most powerful assets, their superweapon, the Eclipse. The Council scientists had spent decades developing this weapon, a massive, planet-destroying device that could wipe out entire civilizations with a single strike. It was said to be the ultimate deterrent, the perfect weapon to keep the galaxy in check. And it was scheduled to be deployed in just a few months. If humanity could destroy the Eclipse, it would send a clear message to the Council that they were no longer the dominant force in the galaxy. The humans weren't just a nuisance. They were a threat, one that the Council could no longer ignore. But the mission was dangerous, more so than any that had come before. The Eclipse was located in the heart of the Council's most heavily guarded territory, a system known as the Calcar Nexus. The system was surrounded by a fleet of over 100 dreadnoughts, with thousands of fighter ships patrolling the area. It was an impossible mission, one that had no guarantee of success. Admiral Kensington stood at the helm of her flagship, the Thunderstrike, gazing out at the star-filled expanse before her. The weight of the decision hung heavily on her shoulders, but she knew it had to be done. For humanity's future, for the hope of every colony, and for the men and women under her command, she would not back down. "We have no other choice," Sarah said quietly, addressing her senior officers. "We hit them hard, and we do it now before they can activate the eclipse. If we wait, we lose our chance." Lieutenant Hayes stepped forward, a look of determination in his eyes. "We've faced impossible odds before, Admiral. We can do this." "We will," Sarah replied. "This isn't just another strike. This is the turning point of the war. If we succeed, the Council will have no choice but to reconsider their strategy. If we fail, we've bought humanity time to regroup and fight again. Either way, we fight for our future." The crew of the Thunderstrike was ready. For the past few weeks, they had undergone extensive training for the mission. They had developed new tactics, new ways to evade the Council's defenses, and new technologies that would give them a slight edge. But nothing could prepare them for the sheer scale of what lay ahead. The fleet departed from their hidden base in the Fringe Nebula, and as they made their way toward the Calcar Nexus, tension filled the air. The Thunderstrike led a fleet of 20 ships, each one carrying the hopes and dreams of humanity. The ships had been heavily modified with experimental stealth systems, energy shields, and precision weaponry. The humans were no longer outclassed in every regard. They had adapted, and they had learned from their past victories. As the fleet entered the Calcar Nexus, the Council's defenses immediately detected the human presence. Thousands of enemy ships swarmed to intercept, and the battle began in earnest. But this time, it wasn't about survival, it was about striking a decisive blow. The human ships danced through the enemy fleet, their agility and speed giving them an edge. The Council's dreadnoughts fired massive beams of energy, but the humans outmaneuvered them with deadly precision, targeting weak spots in the larger ships' hulls and engines. The human fleet fought with a ferocity that no one could have predicted. Their ships darted in and out of the battlefield like lightning, never staying in one place for too long. "We're nearing the superweapons location," Sarah said, her voice calm but firm over the comms. "Prepare for the final push." The Thunderstrike and its fleet made their way toward the heart of the Calcar Nexus, where the eclipse awaited. The planet-sized weapon was hidden within a massive orbital station, surrounded by layers of heavy defenses. The human fleet had no time to waste. They had to disable the station's shields before they could make their final assault. The enemy was closing in, but the humans pressed on, knowing this would be their only chance. Their stealth systems allowed them to bypass most of the outer defenses, but it wouldn't be long before the Council's reinforcements arrived. They had to disable the superweapon now, or it would be the end of them all. As the Thunderstrike neared the orbital station, Sarah made the call. "All ships, engage the superweapon. Target the core. This is it." The fleet launched a series of precision strikes, their weapons overwhelming the station's defenses. The eclipse was now vulnerable. But the Council was not about to let it go without a fight. The station's inner core began to power up, and it became clear that the weapon was about to fire. Sarah's heart raced. If they didn't destroy the core now, the entire system would be obliterated. It was a gamble, but they had no choice. The fleet unleashed everything they had, firing all remaining weapons at the core. The resulting explosion was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. A shock wave of energy rippled across the Nexus, and for a moment, it seemed as though the entire galaxy held its breath. The eclipse had been destroyed. The Council had been dealt a blow from which they could never fully recover. Humanity had proved, beyond shadow of a doubt, that they would not be crushed, not by numbers, not by technology, and certainly not by the overwhelming might of the Galactic Council. As the human fleet began its retreat, victory was in their grasp, but the war was far from over. The battle for the future had only just begun, but humanity had shown that it would fight to the very end, no matter the cost. Admiral Kensington stood on the bridge of the Thunderstrike, watching as the Calcar Nexus slowly faded behind them. A small smile crept across her face. "We've made our mark on the galaxy," she said softly. "And this is only the beginning." The human fleet had done the impossible, and they had proven to the galaxy that humanity could no longer be ignored. It was time for the Council to learn that a species that had once been thought of as weak and insignificant was now a force to be reckoned with. And humanity would stop at nothing to secure its place in the stars. The destruction of the eclipse was a momentous event, one that reverberated across the galaxy. The Council, once confident in their ability to dominate humanity, now found themselves facing the grim reality that they were no longer invincible. But while the loss of their superweapon had shaken their leadership, it hadn't broken them. The Galactic Council's resolve hardened, and they began to realize that they had underestimated humanity in the most dangerous way possible. The Council now understood that the humans weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for their place in the stars. The message was clear: humanity would not stop until they were free from the Council's rule. And though the humans had won a significant victory, the war was far from over. Admiral Kensington knew that they couldn't afford to let their success go to their heads. They had damaged the Council, but the Council's power was far-reaching. It was only a matter of time before their forces mobilized again. The war was entering a new phase, a phase where humanity would need to be more clever and more resourceful than ever before. On Earth, President Clark had begun rallying the people for what would be the most difficult phase of the war. While the human fleet had achieved stunning victories, the damage to their infrastructure was significant. Resources were stretched thin, and the cost of the war had begun to take a heavy toll. Every victory had its price, and every success only made the Council more determined to crush humanity once and for all. Despite these hardships, President Clark refused to relent. "We've come this far," she said in a speech to the Global Council. "We've shown the galaxy that humanity is not to be trifled with. We've won against impossible odds, and we will continue to do so. This fight is far from over, but we will not lose. Our future is ours to secure." Back on the front lines, Admiral Kensington's fleet was preparing for the next phase of their mission, striking at the heart of the Council's leadership. The Council's political structure was its most vulnerable point, and Admiral Kensington knew that the only way to break their resolve was to force them to confront the consequences of their actions. The plan was risky. Intelligence had revealed that the Council's leadership resided on a planet known as Kairos Prime, a heavily fortified world surrounded by layers of defensive stations and fleets. It was the political center of the galaxy, a place where the most powerful leaders of the Galactic Council resided. Taking it would send a message so loud and clear that even the most hardened council members would have no choice but to take notice. But Kairos Prime was heavily defended. The planet was surrounded by an impenetrable shield, and the fleet station there was unlike anything humanity had ever faced before. The Council would throw everything they had to prevent a human strike on their most sacred ground. "You realize what we're up against, Admirals?" Lieutenant Hayes asked, his voice filled with uncertainty as he glanced over the data. "Kairos Prime is surrounded by thousands of ships, and the planet itself is a fortress. If we go in there, it's a one-way trip." Admiral Kensington met his gaze. There was no hesitation in her eyes. "We're not going to Kairos Prime to die, Marcus. We're going to take the fight to the heart of the Council. We will make them realize that they cannot destroy us, not as long as we have the will to keep fighting. And the only way we can do that is by striking where it hurts." The plan was to strike at Kairos Prime during the Council's next major summit. At that moment, the planet would be less heavily defended. Its forces would be focused on securing the political leaders during the gathering. This would be humanity's chance to infiltrate and take the planet, sending a message that no place in the galaxy was beyond their reach. The human fleet would need to infiltrate Kairos Prime's defenses, using every tactic they had learned. Stealth, deception, and surprise would be their greatest assets. They would break through the outer defenses and land on the surface, where they would launch a coordinated assault on the Council's leadership, taking them hostage and forcing them to the negotiation table. Admiral Kensington stood on the command deck of the Thunderstrike, feeling the weight of the mission ahead. She knew the risks, and she knew how many lives were at stake. But there was no turning back. The Council had to be shown that humanity was no longer the underdog. It was a force that could not be ignored. "Prepare the fleet," she said, her voice unwavering. "This is the moment we've been waiting for." The operation was launched without delay. The human fleet, under the cover of darkness, moved toward Kairos Prime. The first stage of the mission was to disable the outer defense grid, which had been constructed to repel any unauthorized ships. Using the fleet's advanced stealth technology, the humans slipped past the outer defense line, taking down smaller stations with precision strikes before advancing to the main planetary defenses. The battle was fierce. The Council's fleet quickly realized they had been infiltrated, and chaos erupted. However, the humans had anticipated this. The fleet split into smaller units, each targeting different key positions across the planet's surface, while the main assault force pushed toward the heart of Kairos Prime. Admiral Kensington's fleet engaged in brutal ground combat as they made their way toward the Council's political capital. Every inch of the planet was a struggle, but the humans fought with the strength and determination of a species that refused to be crushed. They had faced countless challenges in this war, but nothing could break their spirit. After days of intense fighting, the human forces reached the Council's leadership complex. The area was heavily fortified, but the humans had come too far to stop now. A final push, a coordinated strike, and the Council's most powerful leaders were captured. The message was clear. The Council's political structure had been dealt a crippling blow. In that moment, the galaxy would understand that humanity was no longer to be underestimated. The war was far from over, but humanity had delivered a blow that would resonate throughout the galaxy for generations to come. As the Council's leaders were held captive, Admiral Kensington stood on the battlefield, looking out over the destruction they had wrought. The war was shifting, and the humans had proven that they would never give up, no matter the odds. "We've taken the heart of their empire," she said, her voice steady, "but the fight isn't over. We'll keep pushing, because this is our future, and no one can take that from us." The capture of Kairos Prime was a victory that would echo across the galaxy for years to come. Humanity had struck at the very heart of the Galactic Council, crippling their leadership and sending a clear message. No longer would they bow to an empire that had sought to crush them. But while the victory was monumental, it came at a great cost. The war had drained humanity's resources to their limit. The fleet had been battered, and morale was fraying. The Council had been dealt a blow, but they were not defeated. For Admiral Kensington and her fleet, the relief was fleeting. As they returned to their base after the successful operation, the toll of the war became even more apparent. Humanity had won a major victory on Kairos Prime, but the cost in terms of lives lost, ships destroyed, and resources spent had left them vulnerable. In the aftermath of the operation, President Clark held an emergency address to the people of Earth and its colonies. The victory over the Council's leadership was important, but now is the time to rebuild and plan for the long road ahead. "We stand at a crossroads," she said, her voice strong but filled with the weight of the responsibility she carried. "Kairos Prime was a step toward our freedom, but the fight is not over. The Council will retaliate, and we must be ready for what comes next." This victory was not just a blow to their leadership, it was a blow to their pride. And they will not let it go easily. The truth of her words settled in as the human colonies scrambled to recover from the damage inflicted by the war. Supplies were running low, and the war effort was stretching humanity's capabilities to their breaking point. The enemy fleet, though disorganized, was not defeated. The Council's commanders had been crippled, but they had successors, and they were now more focused than ever on one goal: annihilating humanity. Back on the front lines, Admiral Kensington found herself grappling with the reality that victory in one battle didn't guarantee success in the war. The Council's remaining forces had regrouped and were preparing for a massive counteroffensive. Their fleet was large, and their tactics, though predictable, were still effective when faced with a well-coordinated strategy. Humanity could not afford to lose momentum. "We can't keep going like this," Lieutenant Hayes said, looking over the situation reports. "We need reinforcements. Our ships are stretched thin, and if the Council strikes now, we won't have the manpower to hold our ground." Admiral Kensington's face remained stoic. "We don't have the luxury of reinforcements, Marcus. We have to make do with what we have. We've survived this long by improvising, by thinking outside the box. We'll keep fighting until we don't have anything left. But even Kensington knew the truth. Humanity was running out of time. They couldn't keep fighting at this pace. They needed to take the war to a decisive end before their resources, both material and human, were exhausted. She had always been able to rely on humanity's resilience, but even resilience had its limits. In the meantime, the Council began rebuilding, their shattered leadership replaced by a new, more determined generation of rulers. The Council now recognized the true danger humanity posed, and they had one clear objective: wipe humanity out completely before their rebellion spread beyond the reaches of their current war. "They'll come for us with everything they've got," Sarah said quietly, looking out over the damaged fleet. "And they'll come soon." To turn the tide, Admiral Kensington realized that they would need to use the Council's own tactics against them. The humans had already proven their ability to hit hard and fast, but the next phase of the war would require subtlety, deception, and the ultimate strategic risk. Humanity's spies had uncovered a hidden Council facility, a secret installation deep within the Galactic core, one that housed an experimental weapon, even more dangerous than the Eclipse. It was an advanced technology, designed to destroy entire star systems in an instant. The facility was well protected, but the intelligence reports indicated that it was far less defended than Cairo's Prime had been. "This is it," Kensington said, addressing her officers. "If we take down this weapon, the Council will have no choice but to negotiate. They won't be able to fight a war without their deadliest weapon. We hit them here, and we take out their ability to strike at will. However, this mission would require more than just tactical brilliance. It would require sacrifices, human lives, ships, and the very core of what made humanity a symbol of defiance." The Council's defenses were growing tighter, and any misstep could lead to total annihilation. The fleet assembled, ready for what could be their final mission. As the ships entered the Galactic core, Admiral Kensington couldn't shake the nagging feeling that they might not make it out alive. She looked at the faces of her crew, each one determined, but knowing the stakes. The stealth technology was again put to use, as they navigated past layers of enemy ships and sensor nets. The core was a maze of shifting debris and hostile forces, but the humans moved with precision, like shadows in the dark. As the target came into view, their hearts raced. The facility loomed ahead, massive, foreboding, and surrounded by a fleet that outnumbered them 10-1. A final strike, a single chance to end the war before the Council could bring their wrath upon humanity. "All ships, on my mark," Sarah commanded. "We strike fast, we strike hard, and we don't stop until it's done. This is the last time we'll be this close to the heart of their power. We make it count." The fleet split into smaller units, and the chaos of battle ensued. They targeted the facility's energy core with everything they had: missiles, lasers, and experimental weapons designed to pierce through the strongest of shields. Explosions rippled across the station, and the Council's fleet launched retaliatory strikes. As the facility's core began to destabilize, Admiral Kensington's heart raced with anticipation. If they succeeded, they would break the Council's ability to wage war. If they failed, the galaxy would never be the same. Seconds felt like hours, but finally, the impossible happened. The core detonated with a cataclysmic force, sending shockwaves through the system. The facility was gone, and with it, the Council's most powerful weapon. But at what cost? The fleet, severely damaged and decimated, limped back toward their hidden base, knowing that they had dealt the Council a crippling blow. But even in victory, there was a bitter reality. The war had claimed far too much. But humanity had proven that they would never give up. As the dust settled, Admiral Kensington knew one thing for certain. The future of humanity was still uncertain, but they had earned the right to keep fighting. And they would continue to do so, no matter what it cost. The aftermath of the strike on the Council's experimental weapon was both a victory and a reminder of the cost of war. The galaxy had witnessed humanity's unrelenting spirit, and despite the odds, humanity had triumphed again. But as the remains of the once mighty Council fleet scattered into the void, it became clear that the war was still far from over. The devastation caused by the destruction of the weapon had crippled the Council's war machine, but the leaders, now reeling from the loss of their most powerful asset, were not ready to admit defeat. Instead, they turned to desperate measures. A ceasefire was proposed, but with conditions. Humans would have to surrender, their fleets disbanded, and they would be forced to swear allegiance to the Council once more. Humanity had earned a reputation, but they had not yet earned peace. The Council, though weakened, still saw humanity as a threat. They believed that if they could quell the rebellion now, they could restore order. The future of the galaxy was still in their hands, or so they thought. Admiral Kensington, standing at the helm of the Thunderstrike, knew this was the decisive moment. Her people had fought for freedom, for the chance to exist on their terms in the stars. They would not bow to any force that tried to strip them of that future. But she also knew that continued war would bleed humanity dry. There had to be another way, a way to make the Council see that they could no longer hold dominion over the galaxy, that the era of their rule was over. Humanity had been underestimated, and the Council now had no choice but to reckon with the fact that their empire was no longer unshakable. The question remained, what would it take to bring the war to an end, to prevent more bloodshed and suffering? President Clark, working alongside Admiral Kensington and other human leaders, began to plan their next move. Negotiations were on the horizon. A final gambit would be made, a way to turn the tide without further destruction. They would not offer surrender, but rather a challenge to the Council. Humanity would stand as an equal, not as a subordinate. The choice was theirs: continue a war they could never win, or accept humanity's place as a force to be reckoned with. "We've fought and bled for this," President Clark said in a private meeting with Admiral Kensington. "But the war isn't just about us anymore. It's about every colony, every world, every species that the Council has sought to subjugate. If we defeat them now, we secure a future not just for humanity, but for all those who have been oppressed." The plan was set. An emissary, a human envoy, would be sent to the Council, offering terms. They would not beg for peace. They would demand it. And if the Council rejected them, they would know that the rebellion would continue, stronger than ever, and the human resistance would never yield. The emissary, led by Admiral Kensington, would carry a message of defiance and unity, not just for humanity, but for the galaxy at large. This was no longer just a rebellion, it was the beginning of a new era. The era of the Galactic Equal. As Kensington's fleet approached the Council's capital, Kairos Prime, the feeling of finality set in. The planet was no longer a symbol of the Council's power. It had become the site of the final showdown. The representatives of the Council had gathered in anticipation, but they had no idea what was coming. The message was clear: humanity does not bow. Humanity will not be enslaved. Humanity is here to stay. When Admiral Kensington stepped into the Council chambers, she was not alone. Beside her stood representatives from every free world, every colony that had fought for its survival. The room fell silent as she spoke, her voice carrying the weight of every battle fought, every life lost. "We have endured your oppression. We have taken your blows and risen. You tried to extinguish us, but you could not. We stand before you now, not as beggars for peace, but as the future of the galaxy." The Council, once full of arrogance, shifted uncomfortably. They had never anticipated such a move. Humanity, once considered insignificant, was now standing in their midst, demanding what was rightfully theirs: freedom, equality, and a place at the table. "If you want peace," Kensington continued, "it will not come through submission. It will come through respect. We will no longer be your slaves. We will no longer bow before your fleets. Humanity demands its place among the stars. We will no longer be your conquered species." The Council deliberated, but there was no turning back. They had no choice but to acknowledge humanity's strength, both in battle and in spirit. It became clear that the war could not continue if they were to maintain any control over the galaxy. Humanity had turned the tide, and it was no longer just about fighting for survival. It was about forging a new future for all. The negotiations were long, fraught with tension, but ultimately, they resulted in a ceasefire. The Council agreed to peace under one condition: humanity would be allowed to govern itself and become a recognized power in the galaxy. The Council would remain in control of certain territories, but humanity's independence was now assured. The war was over. As Admiral Kensington returned to Earth, she looked out over the planet that had withstood so much, knowing that the battle had been worth it. Humanity was now a force to be reckoned with, not because of its sheer numbers, but because of its unyielding will to survive, to fight for what was rightfully theirs. The galaxy, once ruled by the Council, was now a place where humanity could carve out its future. The scars of war would remain, but they would no longer define humanity. The future was theirs to shape. And so, under the banner of a new dawn, humanity began to rebuild, not just its cities, but its place in the stars. The once silent species had found its voice, and the galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had defied the odds, outnumbered, outgunned, but never outmatched. And in doing so, they had carved their name into the history of the galaxy. The Council had learned a valuable lesson. They could no longer ignore the power of a species that would fight for its freedom, no matter the cost. The future of the galaxy was now in humanity's hands.